Welcome back to our channel, Truth Revealed. I'm Wafat Denaro.
And I'm Sergio Denaro.
In today's episode, we're going to be sharing valuable insights into how to identify deception when you finally confront the individual and ask them that very specific, direct question, such as, "Are you cheating on me?"
Who, me? But before we dive into these techniques, let's establish some common language. The first term is the subject. The subject is the person whose truthfulness is in question. The word subject is typically a law enforcement term, but because we could be talking about a significant other or a spouse or a used car salesman or your boss, it's easier just to always use the term subject, and you always know that we're talking about the person whose truthfulness is in question. The next term that I want to talk about is the word indicators. Indicators are those nuanced body language, facial expressions, verbiage that are things that we're going to teach you how to pick up on that topic is either sensitive or that the subject is being deceptive about something. The last term that I want to talk about is a lie versus a deception. These terms are commonly misused, and people commonly say lie when they're talking about a deception. A lie is a 100% complete misrepresentation of the truth. Lying is very difficult because it creates a tremendous amount of stress. The problem with lying is that evidence can be used against you to prove that what you said was wrong. At that point, your credibility is completely destroyed, and you're going to face whatever consequences you're afraid of. So lying is not very common. What you're going to see a lot more of is deception. Deception is what we're going to teach you how to pick up on. Deception often utilizes shreds of truth and then puts gaps in the story or utilizes a bunch of different techniques to try to get you to infer the story that they want you to believe. And as people, we have a tendency to want to believe what we're told. And so deception is often quite effective. Deception also gives the subject the ability to walk back what they said. If you pick up on something and call them out on it, a deception is much easier to say, well, I didn't really mean that, as opposed to a complete lie, which you can't say, I said this, but what I really meant was XYZ. Now your credibility is shot. Let me give you an example here. Let's say that your wife asked you if you went out to club XYZ last night with so-and-so. If you did go to that club and you say that you didn't go there, now if they have video of you there, which would be the evidence that could be used against you, that is a 100% lie. I mean, that is a lie because it's a 100% misrepresentation of the truth. And there could be evidence that is going to contradict you, and your credibility now is completely blown. There's no ability to walk that story back. What you're going to see usually is deception. Deception is going to say, well, I was with Billy last night and we went out, we got drunk, we went to a few different places. I'm not sure if we went to that club. This type of story is deception. It is not directly saying no, and usually there's something built into that story like, well, I was drunk and we went to a few different places. I may have gone to that place. So that's deception. So we are going to be training you on deception detection, and we will talk about lying and how to detect a lie, but that is actually much easier than the deception detection part. So with all this being said, we'll move on to the next section here.
First, our brains are really effective at recalling big recent events. So when asking one of these questions, it shouldn't take a whole lot of time to get a response back. An example of one of these questions would be, how old is your youngest kid?
5.
Another example would be, what kind of car do you drive?
A Ford Explorer.
So these answers are really front of mind, and it doesn't take a whole lot of time. There's not a whole lot of recollection. The answers should be quick and almost immediate.
The second type of question are questions that require you to recall a memory from way back when, that you think about it for a minute, or it could be a small detail that might not be too long ago. But these types of questions are going to be more along the lines of, you know what? Hold on just 1 second here. What did I get you for Christmas last year?
The serving tray.
Yeah, so you could see there that I asked a question that required that she search her memory. I forced her to go back and relive Christmas Day. What did she get for Christmas last year? So you can expect someone to pause for a few seconds, and then they're going to probably look up, and then most people will look to the left. Some people will look to the right, but you need to get a baseline on the person that you're talking to know whether they specifically look to the left or to the right. When somebody's searching their memory banks, they're not going to change from looking to the left to looking to the right. So Wafa here always looks to the left. So I know if she's recalling something from memory because I know that she looks to the left.
Did I look to the left?
You looked to the left.
Finally, for those individuals making up a story, fabricating a story, it generally takes a little bit of time because not only are they creating a story, but they're also having to go through their memory banks to make sure it doesn't contradict with something that you may or may not know, and making sure that their fabricated story is in line with the facts. And because we talked about, recalling an event, you look up and to the left. When you make up a story or when you're fabricating a lie, you generally look up and to the right because that's the creative part of your brain, and you're going back and you're creating and you're making a story. And so I'll ask Sergio. Well, it's not going to work, really. We're not going to be able to do this.
It will work. Let's hijack the camera again. Let's see. You went to an event 2 nights ago, right? Okay. I want you to tell me a story that is something other than what you actually did. So now what you're going to do is you're going to tell me a story of where you went the other night that wasn't to that event. So just go ahead and make something up, and you see which direction she's looking? Yeah. So make up a story and go ahead and tell me the story.
So I went to the theater and watched Phantom of the Opera with some of my friends.
Which friends were there? Tell me 3 friends that were there.
I went with Andrea, with Sarah, and that was it.
Okay, so you saw I put her on the spot there. But what we were trying to do was we're trying to activate the part of your brain or the part of her brain that fabricates a story, that creates something out of nothing. She couldn't draw from memory because I actually pointed out the memory and then told her she had to tell a story that was anything other than that, which forced her to move out of the memory portion of her brain and into the part of her brain that can produce new stories, to fabricate and synthesize. So the bottom line is, when you are synthesizing information, most likely you're going to be looking to the right. But some people actually look to the left when they're doing that. So you want to baseline the person that you're talking to. When somebody's pulling information from memory, then they're going to be looking to the left, unless, of course, you baseline them and they always look to the right. Now, the last thing that I want to say here is that you want to differentiate between the second type of question that we talked about and the third type of question that we talked about. When I ask you a question, I need to be very certain that I know whether the question that I'm asking requires you to search your memory or not. So if you murdered somebody last night, that's something that's going to be right there on the forefront of your memory. That's not something that you have to search for like a Christmas present from your wife 2 years ago. So that's the big difference there. What we want to do is ask those type 1 questions and look for a response that is not a type 1 response. We're looking for that response from that type 3, which can sometimes look like that type 2, but we know that it's not. We know that somebody is not really trying to remember really difficult, a really hard to remember piece of information of whether they murdered somebody last night or cheated on their spouse.
So lying on the spot is virtually impossible because of the brain power it takes. And, Sergio put me on the spot and asked me what I did 2 nights ago and asked me to make something up. And that caused a lot of stress for me because I have to think about, how do I not incorporate what I actually did? How do I tell him a story that's believable? Who do I incorporate into my story that's going to, corroborate where I was, whether truthfully or not? And how do I have outs to be able to change my story in case he has information that I didn't know he had? So as you think about when people are lying, all of that stuff is going through their mind and they're really trying to work in overdrive. So what they end up doing is having rehearsed stories. They think about these stories, they come home, they tell these rehearsed stories. And what you want to think about when asking about whatever the incident is after their rehearsed story ends, that's when you want to ask the questions. And that's when they have to be deceptive and start creating. And that's when you want to focus your questioning and ask those tough questions and begin that assessment process.
Now, there's a lot more information that we're going to teach you when it comes to that assessment phase. But for the sake of this video, we're just going to cover that confrontation here. And now you're going to ask them that really tough question, that confrontational question. Something like, I know you're having an affair with Brian. Did you see him last night? That question it ends the assessment phase and it begins what we call the confrontation phase, that stage 2. Actually, from that initial question, you're going to get a slew of indicators because it's going to take them off guard. They've just given you a rehearsed story and you've changed the subject on them. And normally what you'll see is their brain get overwhelmed. They'll just freeze for a minute. But there's a few different types of techniques that a person will use when they're responding to that type of confrontational question. So let's get into that portion next. Okay, so the first indicator that we want to talk about is that 1 to 2 second pause right after you ask that direct confrontational question. You remember when you told me that you went to the opera with Sarah the other night?
Yeah.
It's come to my attention that you've been seeing Brian again. Did you go out with him the other night? Well, that right there is that awkward 2 second pause that happens when you ask that type of question, that direct question that needs that direct response. The subject isn't searching their memory for anything because they know what they did the other night. So yeah, I would expect a direct response right there. And instead you got that type 3 type of response that, oh my God, let me figure out what's going on here. So that being said, we'll move to indicator number 2.
So the second indicator is asking to repeat the question or repeating the question themselves. And what this does is this buys them some additional time to think about what their answer is going to be. And it really gives them a break for their brain to process and think about what their answer is going to be. So for example, Sergio, the other night you told me you were going to dinner with your friends, and I have reason to believe that you were out with Molly. Were you out with Molly?
Was I out with Molly?
And that's how they repeat the question and give themselves some time to think about and process what their deceptive answer is going to be.
Next, we're going to talk about indicator number 3, which is responding with a counter question. A counter question is a question like, do I seem like the type of person that would do that? Or why would you even ask me that question? Wafa, remember the other night when you said that you went to the opera with Sarah?
Yep.
I have reason to believe that you've been seeing Brian again. Did you go out with Brian that night?
Why would you even ask me that?
So did you see that increase in hostility, the change of the tone of voice, and that counter question? That is a very scripted response. It seems natural. It seems to the person in the chair like that's how they should come across, that your question is so offensive that they should be offended in that moment. But that is something that you see on TV, you see it on movies. and it is actually a very scripted response. It's a strong indicator of deception, and it's not something you want to see in your spouse. With that being said, let's move on to number 4.
The fourth indicator is referring to a previous statement with something along the lines of, like I said before, or I already told you this. I'm going to give you an example of what it's like. So, Sergio, the other night you said you were going out with friends, but I have reason to believe you were out with Molly. Were you out with Molly?
I can't believe that this conversation is coming up again. It seems like we talk about this all the time. I can't believe, why do you keep asking me this?
So you see from his response, he immediately got aggressive with it and put a lot of words and a lot of space between my direct question, were you out with Molly, and the time that he denied it. I can't believe we're asking this again. I can't believe we're going down this road. This isn't the normal way to respond when you have nothing to hide. The normal way would be, no, I was out with my friends. So he continued to refer to what he had previously said before he came back to actually making a statement of denial.
Next, we're going to talk about indicator number 5, which is the phrase, I would never do that, or I wouldn't do that. Do you remember when you told me that you were going out with Sarah the other night?
Yeah.
I have reason to believe that you went out with Brian again. Have you been seeing him?
I would never do that.
You've probably seen that phrase being said a lot in TV shows and movies, or hopefully not from your significant other, but that is a phrase that you will see a lot, and it is a strong indicator of deception. It does not follow the formula for truth, which is using I and the present tense. It uses future tense, which is a way of removing yourself from that incident or from that environment. So it reduces stress by technically not lying. I would never do that again. I would never want to do that. There's a lot of ways in your head that you can rephrase that to make it so that it's not an actual lie when you say it. So again, I want to iterate this point. I would never do that is not a denial. Only the phrase, I didn't do that, is an actual denial.
The final indicator is attempting to change the subject or avoidance of the question completely. For example, you told me a couple nights ago you were out with your friends, but I have reason to believe you were out with Molly. Were you out with Molly?
I think the real issue is that you have trust issues here. I know that people go to counseling for this kind of stuff, and I think that we need to talk about your trust issues.
So he never addressed the question at all. He completely changed the subject and tried to flip it to where it's my issue and not his behavior. And this is really like classic deception and really classic manipulation of what the actual reality is.
We hope you've enjoyed this video. We've created the empathy method, which is a method of determining not just deception, but of determining the full and accurate truth. So we teach you how to interrogate your subject and get all of the information, not just to know that they're lying to you. That's only part of it. You want to know actually what the truth is and what's the whole story behind it. So we hope that you like this video, and we're putting together a bunch more videos like this because this is a very broad topic and there's a lot of different scenarios where deception can occur.
So like and subscribe for more videos on how to catch a cheating partner, how to properly interview and know the folks you're interviewing are being honest, and being able to know who's being deceptive in every aspect of your life. Like and subscribe.